So that's the problem, and here's how I'm going to fix it. Hi friends, Tracy here from the Sewing Channel. Welcome back, and if you're new here, you're in for a treat. I've never taught you this before. Today's the day, friends. Let me take you on the gap quilting journey. Enough talking already. Let's go. One of the first things I do when I want to make a gap quilt is to set out my parameters. Now here you can see I have two borders, a top and a bottom, and everything in between there is the space where all the pieces of the quilt are going to go. And I've also put pins to the left and to the right, so that way I don't go over the perimeter. So then I'm just going to take my panel pieces that I've already cut out, and I know that I want them scattered about the quilt. I don't want there to be rhyme and reason. I want one to be up, one to be down, and so on and so forth. I have 12 rectangles, so I'm going to make myself 4 distinct rows on this quilt. Next, I'm going to take the bigger blocks in this quilt that I've already sewn up. Now this tutorial isn't about how to make a pinwheel or a sawtooth star or anything like that, but I've made them up ahead of time because I know that I want them in this quilt. And they're all different sizes, from 4 inches to 8 inches. It didn't matter. It's whatever I wanted. And you can do that in gap quilting. It doesn't have to be the same size. You can make them all different. So I'm taking those irregular blocks that are not the same size as my rectangle panel pieces, and I'm laying them in the quilt how I think that I want to see them. And I'm making sure all the while too that I'm lining them up into rows so that way it will be easy to sew together. I really do try not to be too fussy when I get to this part of the quilting, because I mean you could be here for hours just fidgeting and putting things in all different ways. I mean really just grab your pieces, and if you get them up there all together at once, then you can stand back and look at them and realize, oh, hey, that piece should go over there and that piece should go over there. But the biggest tip I can give you is to stay within those parameters. And you can see I've taken now the smallest block, which are those tiny pinwheels, which are consistent in this quilt as 3.5 inches square. And then I'm scattering those all over the quilt, adding them next to the panel pieces, adding them next to the 9 patches or the other little blocks that I have in here. And just remember too, all that's up there right now, it's not set in concrete. We can change this at any time during this whole process as we gap quilt. It's so creative, friends. Okay, now what's next, right? So you've split your rows. I have 4 rows here. And I'm going to show you real quickly here how I do this one little spot on the quilt before we get into the real meat of it, the real tutorial of this video. You can see how I'm just adding on to the pieces that are already there, keeping things nice and square. No worries though if you're not catching what I'm doing right now, because I'm going to go into detail here in a minute, but I just wanted to show you kind of what it looks like without any instructions, so you at least can see a little bit of how I am piecing all of this together. Now it may take you a little longer the first time that you try to make a quilt like this, but trust me when I tell you, you are going to have the most relaxing, fun time making a quilt like this. This was so much fun, friends. I kid you not. So much fun that this is the second quilt that I'm making with this same exact fabric. I know, right? And plus, friends, I guarantee you that no one else in the world will be making the same quilt as you'll be making when you make a gap quilt. It's all about how you see it and how you want it to look in the end. I really do hope, friends, that giving you this pre-game, so to speak, on this quilt will give you a better idea of when we get to the actual tutorial. Because it's really not hard, it's just a different mindset, just a different way to quilt. I hope you can see that it is all coming together here on this lower right-hand corner of this quilt. We've taken those beautiful fabrics and we've just turned them into this little tiny masterpiece in part of the quilt. The panels I'm using are American Jane Storytime, and I also did use a 5-inch charm pack of the same, American Jane Storytime, and I'll tell you, it was a pleasure to work with this beautiful fabric. I really do hope I've inspired you to keep watching and to learn how to make a quilt just like this. Now, I'm using the term gap quilting, and it's not really a thing, it's just what I came up with because I don't know what else to call it, right? I mean, I figured gap quilting would be the best term because you're literally filling in the gaps around all the things. I hope that makes sense. For the most part, when I start to gap quilt, it's usually around something rectangle and not square, something like that, or a panel, or something where I want a lot of different shapes and different things within a quilt, and I want them to look all scattered. So that's when I would do gap quilting. I've never done a tutorial on a quilt like this, so I figured it was time. I will take the block that I have the most of, which are these little pinwheels, and they run 3.5 inches square for the most part. I do have bigger ones in here like this. So since I have that 3.5 inch square, I'm first going to take my background fabric and I'm going to cut 3.5 inch strips to start working with. That's going to be the easiest cut within this quilt. For an example, this 3.5 inch square here has a 3.5 inch strip going this way, a 3.5 inch strip going this way, one going this way, one going this way, this way, this way, this way. You get the picture. And so once I get going on that, then I start to fill in the rest. So let's cut some of those 3.5 inch strips. This background fabric is so pretty. I love it with the little dots on it, and it scatters throughout the whole quilt beautifully. I fold it salvage to salvage. This is a fold right here, and these are the salvages. And then I fold it again, and I make sure that it's lined up nicely, because you don't want anything to be crooked and you don't want any humps in your strips. Take my ruler. I'm going to use the 2 ruler method. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3 and a half. I'm going to make sure that this fold right here is toward me and the salvage is away from me, and then slice it. And this gives me a nice 3.5 inch strip to work with. So I have my 3 strips and they're all pressed and ready to go, because you want to make sure that you press out those creases. Now you just figure out what you're going to work on, and you're going to take little sections like, okay, let's do this one right here since it's right here. So we know that this block is going to go here, here, and here. Just kind of sectioning these little 3 pieces out. It's going to go in the row, but we're going to work small first. So we know that we have a 3.5 inch strip here, and this is going to be 3.5 this way and 3.5 this way. So what I'm going to do is put 3.5 there and this little 3.5 piece here. So bring this down. Let me cut off the salvage. So I'm just going to flip this over and take even this big long strip here, and then I'm going to put a 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. Finger press this out, and then bring it up here and just line it up and see a roundabout. It doesn't have to be perfect of where this is going to end as opposed to this block right here. So I'm just going to come in a little bit, and I'm just going to make a finger crease in this fabric right here, just finger creasing it, and I'm going to trim that off. Now I do press in between. I just press this, but I don't want to take the time to show you all the pressing because I don't want it to take away from the technique that I'm trying to show you. We're going to just set this up here like so. Now I know I'm going to need about, this is how I do it, friends. I don't know. I know I need about a thumb's worth right there of my thumb, right? Where it goes to the first joint. It's just how I do it. It's, you know, it is what it is. So there's that piece, then I'm just going to add it there. Now you also want to keep an eye on what this looks like where that separates right there. Now I think I want a piece above here, right there, just a little piece, because I don't think I want it to come right up to the edge, because this one's at the edge and this one, and I don't know if I'm going to keep it like that. So you just want to be mindful, and you can always add that toward the end too. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that for a second and see where this one lands. So you can see here, I want this one down a little bit. So I know I'm going to need about a whole thumb's worth there, and just about one fingernail digit there. So I need the top and I need the bottom in there. And then while you're here at the sewing machine, you're just going to go ahead and pop those on there. And if you cut too much, just trim it down afterwards. So we have this pressed, and it's going to go about right there. Let me just bring this one down just a little bit. You can see this little bit right here. To meet up with this one, I am going to be putting a strip of background there, but let's continue working right here. This piece right here is the piece that you're going to want to add all of this to right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and make it a 3.5 inch that I already have cut here to match right there. So I'm going to bring it over here, and I'm still working off that same strip. So I'm just going to take this and put right sides together all the way up to the end of that strip, and then I can just trim off here if I want, so I don't have to take that all to the sewing machine, right? And then you're going to just open that up and press it. So here's what we have right here, which that's going to match up pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and just put these two together. Now, if this one was longer or this one was longer, I would still sew them together if it was just a little bit, and then I would just trim them flush. Whichever one was the shortest, that's how short I would go there. Okay, so we have that going on here. It's looking pretty good. I'll come down just a little bit because I still think I'm going to be putting a strip along the top there and one here. So I think these are going to be good here connected. So I'm going to want to add, you know, about a thumb worth to the first digit right here, and then, you know, about a whole thumb there and a little over one there. So first, let's just go ahead and add that bottom piece, and then we'll add, or no, let's add the two side pieces. See, you can go about it a couple ways. I can add this one first and then add the two in the length, and that will pretty much finish up that whole area. Or I can do here, then there, or however, just to get it to that point where it fits in this spot. So I can even sew this on the right hand side, and I can trim that in half and put it on the other side if I have enough fabric there. I'm going to go ahead and just trim this right now. But you could have trimmed that totally at the onset when you first set it on there. And you can keep putting it up on your design board to check like I'm doing. How did I have it? I don't even know. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit here on this side. I can just take another one of this 3.5. Because even if you only use half of the length of it, you're still going to be able to use it somewhere else in this quilt for sure. Press it out. So what I'm going to do next is add the length here, but I'm going to trim this up a little bit to keep that even, and I'm just going to add a full strip on. So let's just even this out. That one's too short, so I'm going to have to add in a big long one. I'm going to leave the salvage out there because I don't want that in my quilt. Come over here and just slice off that excess. press this out. So here we have this right here. So the next thing I'm going to do, cut this straight and then add this to it because it's got some jagged edges there. You'll probably see. Oh, you can see there. I'm going to just take this and flip this down, and I'll trim it all nice after. You don't want to trim all this excess off until after you have this whole area block, so to speak, done. Okay, so there is that. So this is what I'm going to do, I think. Let me think here. Go up a little bit. I'm probably going to have to add more here. I didn't realize, or did I? Did I mess that up? So I'm just going to wait on this in this area here. I think I'm going to have to trim that down though and add one big piece there to match that up. But for right now, I'm going to add a strip of fabric right here. I'm going to trim this down though to catch some of that because I know I'm not going to need all this. So I think I'm going to at least half this right here. And that's just stuff that I think about as I go along in this quilt. So I'm just giving you the mindset. So if we put that one there, we take this piece that we cut off there, and I will put that top on there. Once you press that out, make sure that you cut the sides, so that way everything stays nice and neat, and you're ready for the next, cut and add on. So there's that. So I'm thinking I am going to have to put a big piece right there. But first, before I do that, though, I need to add this piece down here, which I'm guessing is going to be my, look, and this one fits. See how that works out? It just works. I don't know how, but it just does. Once you press it out, cut off the sides here. Save these little pieces, these little cutoffs, because I use those too throughout the quilt. You can easily put these together and make this one strip. Okay. So that looks like it fits pretty good right there. So what I'm going to do while I'm here, add these two pieces together, and then I'm going to find a strip to fit there. This one may be a little tad longer than what's needed, but we'll be able to trim that off. You just have to make sure that everything lines up good there because you don't want to cut any of your blocks off. So what you'll do is just take this and trim that where this side is just a tad longer and to meet it up with this piece. Okay, so that's where we're at so far. So I think we're going to need, like I said, a strip there. I'm going to trim this up, and I'm going to need to add a little bit here for sure. So let me trim this first and then add a 3.5 inch strip, and I'll trim that up and see what we have. So I put that top piece on. Now I'm just going to trim it up the side. So this is what we have. So I know I'm definitely going to not need that much going, or maybe I will. See, I don't know, because this one comes down pretty far, so maybe I'll need that space there, but I don't know yet. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this here and only cut it in the end if I need to. So the next thing I'm going to do is find a strip for this spot right here. So I just need a little skinny spot, which if I cut this in half, this piece, I'm going to sew it together and make it one long strip. First thing I need to do is find the center. And I'll find the center just by folding it longwise, and then I will cut it right on that crease. Then I'll take and put right sides together, and I will marry these two pieces together. Press them, even them up, because I don't know, my crease wasn't too even. So let's just trim this up. And we're going to just add that to this. Once that's pressed, go ahead and trim that excess off. Okay, so this is what we have. Put that up a little bit so you can see what's happening here. Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to have to cut some of this off because now I'm invading into that top row. You know, we already have a preset width in between, so because of our markers, the border up on top and the border on the bottom, I've measured to what I want, and then I just keep everything within that perimeter. So I'm definitely going to have to trim some of that off. I just don't know how much yet. So when you don't know right at the moment, just wait on it, because you may end up having to add more on if you take it off. So yeah. So here's the problem that I face right now with this gap quilt. And it might happen to you, so stick close here so you can figure out how you're going to fix it. I want you to focus right here on this side line. You see where that picture ends, the little pinwheel? I did end up adding a strip here to make this jut out a little bit more because I thought I needed a little bit more, but that's not what I needed. The thing is, I really don't want this to be eaten up by the binding. So that's why I went ahead and put that strip there. But it still makes this particular row too wide, more wide than these two. So something's got to give here. And if you look over here, I do have room to cut off some of this. So that will work and this will work. If I bring this in a little bit over here, because I do have a little bit to cut off here. But here's the problem. When I move this more this way, I'm not going to be even there. I need the sides of this quilt to be even all the way down if I want a square quilt. So that's the problem, and here's how I'm going to fix it. I did unpick this bottom border right here, so that way I can access in this quilt. But before I even did that though, I looked in the whole row, and I tried to figure out where I could slice at in order to bring two pieces together. The only spot in this quilt that I can really see that I can do that is over here at the beginning, because I do have a little bit of a space there where I can slice it and cut out like a 1/2 to 3/4 inches to get this thing to fit overall. So I unpicked it up to here, and what I'm going to do is slice right here, right down the center, and then I'm going to put those two pieces back together, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that should be enough to bring this in, and it'll just be a skinny type piece right here. So that's the fix. So let's slice it and see what we get. So I'm just gonna line it up so that it slices so that I have enough seam allowance that I'm not going to be covering up any pictures too. So I'm gonna ultimately go right down the middle of this seam, or this piece, so to speak. So this piece right here, I'm gonna cut right down the middle, but it's gonna follow through the entire row. Okay, friends, I'm gonna slice. Pray for me. Okay. Now I'm just going to take this piece, and I'm just gonna go just like that, because it's just, about a 1/2 inch to 3/4. And I might take a fat 1/4 inch seam allowance on this. Okay, let me press this and then I'll show you what we got. I went ahead and I pressed that, and I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of the border on right here, just so that everything's ready to go. Okay, friends, hopefully you can see here how much better this is in alignment, and that way I won't have any binding that's covering up that pinwheel. And we're good to go over here too. You may have to maybe fix a couple different spots. Maybe I was thinking this spot right here, if this was too wide, I would shorten that up. But yeah, no, I didn't need to do that. So there might be a couple spots in the end where you need to shorten your rows, or maybe lengthen the rows. You can do that as well. Slice it and add more fabric in. So our next step is to put all this together. Now I did put row 2 and 3 together already, but let's go ahead and put row 1 and row 2 together. So that looks good. I connected the first 3 rows. Now I'm going to add the 4th row, and where we fixed it there, it should be good. Because I'll only have to trim off a little bit there. It'll be close there. But yeah, and close over on the 3rd row, but Yeah, I think it's gonna work. Okay, friends, let me get the last row on. Are you loving how well that my design wall sticks up a full entire quilt top? I know, right? I have a full tutorial on my channel just for you. I will totally link this at the end. Here's the final reveal of the quilt top. What do you all think? Do you like the way it's all scattered and spaced? If you do, then Gap Quilting is totally for you. Let me get this down. Let me put this already quilted one up here that I made already, and we can take a look at what it's going to look like after it's been quilted. Okay, so this one I have already sandwiched it with cotton batting, and I also used a 100% linen sheet for the back of this quilt. This is a gift for my granddaughter's first birthday coming up next month, and I just wanted it to be a real keepsake for her, especially with this linen. I think she's going to just love it. Now the other quilt is going to be for my other granddaughter, so they will have kind of matchy-matchy quilts, but that's okay. They're both from Mimi. It's all good. Now you can see here, this one I did a little bit differently. They both have the same fabrics, same amount of fabrics. This one may be a little bit bigger just from looking at it, but I think it's just because the batting is sticking out and I haven't trimmed it and put the binding on it yet. But overall, it's the same exact concept. I've taken the panel pieces, positioned them just like I showed you at the beginning, and worked around all the pieces. I hope that Gap Quilting has inspired you to give it a try. Look at your screen right now. I've hand-picked some videos just for you if you enjoyed today's tutorial. Until next time on the Sewing Channel, take care.